Okay, I guess most of you have seen my face, my beard. So actually, I have this habit every time I mess up network automation, I shave myself, the head. So yeah, when I saw the proposal for presentation with the topic that it should be about success stories, I was thinking, my failure is also a success. So I want to talk about the journey of a project I started a long time ago. And I guess many of you have done already probably some zero touch. Who has developed a zero touch solution? Okay, not so many, but still some. So it's nothing rocket science, it's nothing special. But yeah, I will hopefully keep the time. So, yeah, my contacts, that's pretty easy. If there is a security warning, just ignore it and give your credit card details there, please. So, how did it start? It was 2015, and one customer came to us and said, we have seen in your CCIE labs, you have all automated, like we had a bunch of racks, like you probably have seen in other environments, and you could select a lab, and it deployed automatically. Everything was prepared. So they came and asked, could you do something called staging robot? So they wanted to stage their campus devices, mostly layer 2 or layer 3 access switches. It was a Cisco shop, so the stage was there, and we were thinking like, yes, of course, should be not so hard. Just some zero touch, how difficult can it be, right? So, yeah. Then we were, in my opinion, a winning team. So a colleague of mine who I was studying with him before, and me, we were working at this institute, and yeah, he was really focusing on software engineering at this time. I finished my bachelor degree in 2013, and when I was studying, I was always in my mind, I want to go to computer infrastructure, network, so I'm trying to avoid all the programming modules. And then 2014, I first tried to look at SDN, all this hype, all this PowerPoint, works in PowerPoint stuff. And I realized now I need to program. So, of course, I had my fair share for a couple of weeks with OpenFlow, luckily gone. And yeah, I had to start programming. And this opinion for me was extremely good boost because he was extremely hard on me with all my pull requests. So the first probably 50 pull requests, he just declined. He said, no, you can do that better, you can do this different. He was really, yeah, much more into all the Django framework we used, so he knew all the tricks, all the magic. In the beginning for me was like, why does this REST API now look like this? And yeah, so it was a hard journey to learn, but it was really interesting, and we really worked well together. So if you have the chance to work with someone, try to learn from each other. That's definitely one of my suggestions. We also had later then joining a third person who was more into UI. For me, UI, it has to be functional. I don't care if the button is red or blue, but some people, they care. So yeah, we have luckily also people for that. We ended up to get this kind of simple architecture, I would say. So we have the network device on the right side, and then we have TFTP, DHCP, if the customer does not have DHCP, so it was easier for us to test. We have everything in control with all the options we had to find out. We have an elk stack there for logging, because the idea was to have it event-driven as possible. So it was sounding good and nice. In the middle, we had the idea to have a task management workflow engine with some magic. We have our own developed Django application on the left side with all the integrations. And the idea was that we also can integrate with tools like IPAM, network monitoring, all the basic stuff, right? So it looks fairly simple. If you now have to debug this 10 years after, it's not so simple anymore. So yeah, if you write code or build a solution, even if you only just pull some components together, think about how can I maintain this 10 years later? Because there is a chance it will be still somewhere running. And if you have to debug, yeah, it's sometimes horrible to see your old code. So, event-based, why event-based? The idea was that we can put this device wherever in the network we want. It comes up. We don't have to track serial numbers, MAC address, or model IDs. So if a new device comes up, it gets a stage configuration. It will call to our server and say, hey, I'm new here. I want to have a configuration. And then you can say, this device belongs to this department, needs this and this configuration, all this. Yeah, easy things nowadays we have from the vendors most of the time. If they work, it's another topic, but yeah. So, sounded easy. The first proof of concept we did, we used EEM, the Cisco event management thingy. It was a good idea maybe in the beginning, but we realized we need also to support layer 2 devices. So that was a little of a bump, and we were thinking like, the whole idea we had, now how can we do this? Maybe to say, for the guys who remember, one of the requirements was to still support iOS 12. So iOS 12, there is no fun with Python, there is no PNP, there is just simple, I think they called it smart install with DHCP option 150, I guess, and the TFTP. So yeah, so what we have found out is that even on the layer 2 devices, you can run Tackle or TCL scripts, however you want to pronounce it. And we're thinking, okay, maybe let's use this one. At this time, there was already some thoughts about then PNP later. So the idea was that if we don't have to support iOS 12 anymore, maybe we can update and use something newer. Never happened. It still runs with Tackle. It works. So yeah, who has done some Tackle programming? Not scripting, programming. Who loves it? We ended up, or I took the shorter string. We had to write 900 lines of code in the end. I believe it's the first version of AI I wrote because it has over 100 if statements. It kind of simulates the human going through all the different versions of install commands because we had to support in the end, how many versions are there? 12, then there's 15, 16, 17, there was 3A something. All these different platforms and different iOS had different commands. So many things can go wrong. So yeah, I had to take more than 50 cold showers because I was doing such ugly stuff with Tackle.
How many haircuts?
How many?
Haircuts.
I lost a lot of hair in this project, yeah. So how did it look? Did not look so bad for this time, I would say. We had combination between server rendered and some Angular for some nice effects. Nothing done by me, luckily. But yeah, there is also a challenge. What do we do in the back end? What do we do in the front end, in the JavaScript? And at one point, you have to choose, right? So also, all these decisions can bite you later. Yeah, so in the end, you have to make a decision. Maybe it's the wrong one, but you will not know until it's too late. But better to make a wrong decision, but be proud of it, than just think about it and change your mind all the time. Go with one, make you think, and maybe you have to redo the design. We had also redesigned the whole application in the end to front-end rendering, but at the time, I think it was the right decision. So also, now using the whole stack with Python, with Django, at the time, with the knowledge I had at this time, or we had, it was definitely the right decision. Would I do it exactly the same now? No. I would not use the same technology, probably. I would do a lot of stuff different, but yeah, I think the journey is the way that we have to focus on, and not on the result. And yeah, so this is one overview. We have some details here. We have a log. I guess I should need the pointer. We had here some log information. Yeah, so everything worked well, was pretty neat. It was simple. And then there was more feature requests, there was more feature requests, and then it's always the question, what should I really add into the code? What should I not add? What should be just a script? And keeping simple. One decision, if you remember this workflow engine we had, was to use SaltStack. At the time, I was thinking that's the perfect solution, because it's not Ansible. No, it was like we have an API, we have an event bus, we have the possibility to load stuff from custom Python scripts into this pillar architecture. So it sounded like a great idea. And this SaltStack is so deeply in the main that it's really hard to take it out now. Because it was a decision. I would definitely not do this decision again. That's also the reason why this log, it's directly coming from SaltStack. Yeah, it's sometimes you make decisions, they're not great, but you have to live with it. Or we still could replace it, right? But it would kind of take a lot of fundamental changes in the whole architecture. So if you build something and you build some vendor locking or solution lockings, you have to be aware that this can take a lot of time to replace again. So SaltStack, one of the really nice features we were thinking of was, if we have these SLS files, now the user itself can go and change his workflow, right? So he can log in on the server, he has the permissions, he can edit the file. And one thing we did here was we were able to print the labels who come on the switch directly. So it was, for this customer, it was the sign that the staging was over when the label comes out. So the label was printed, and he knew this box is finished, I can take it, I can install it. Spoiler, it was a great idea, believe, but the customer never touched this SLS file. He always said, oh, can you change this? Or can you make this change? And in the end, it's, yeah. One thing I want to say is, you have to think what is actually, who is using your solution. And you probably don't know, but how will they use it? Will they use it in the way you designed it? Most likely not. They will always find a way to use it in a way you did not really anticipate. But one point I want to say here is, you have to go with this decision. We still could fix this, but yeah, it was an idea to have it. It did not really pay out. So it's kind of a legacy dependency we have now, and it's one of the reasons why I believe this solution is so complicated to maintain now. Because who here has all the knowledge for, let's say, Python, Tackle, SolStack, who can watch or read code 10 years old and understand it in less than 2 hours? We have one guy. Okay. So, yeah, you see, you have some, if you want to make yourself, how can I say, unreplaceable, that's a great way. So, one other thing is, we had a lot of awesome feature in mind. We were programming this and I was thinking, oh, this feature must be, this feature is a key. They almost never were used. So even if you want to implement something, is it really needed? Because many of this is now in the solution who is still productive, just that code. It is there, it should be maintained, it should be updated sometimes, but yeah, it is not really used. So for example, we had in the early beginning, we had this construct with network domains where you can have hierarchy and then you can define your DNS on the top level and going down and you can override this stuff. Not really used. Even if it's, in my opinion, a nice feature. But yeah, if the customer does not need this because he just has different templates with hard-coded values there, and if he needs to change something, he will just change the whole template. Yeah, you cannot really force him to use your idea you had. Another thing was we have the possibility to generate a web form depending what variables are defined in your changer template. So if I write a new template, automatically generating the web form, was, in my opinion, my favorite feature. Never used in the new UI, not even exposed. But the logic, everything is still there. We still have dependencies who need to be updated sometimes. SolStack I have mentioned. Also the template with the possibility to overwrite parts or to have snippets to avoid copy pasting. Not really used because customer decided to have just huge templates, paste them in and adapt. At one point, they even, for a new device, took the template out, search replaced some variables and put it back. Definitely not the way we intended to use the tool, but yeah, you have to think about who will use it, how they will use it. So this was an example. We have the template, and from this template, automatically this form can be generated where we have list, or we could have even more complicated data structure. In my opinion, a nice feature. At this time, I would not implement it again because probably no one will use it beside of me. If you are your own user, I'm happy to do this, but yeah. So then, we'll have to see. There was the point that the customer said, oh, we hit a .1x bug. We need to update 5,000 switches to yesterday. So can you do this? And we were saying like, yes, we can do it. We would really prefer to just do it as a one-shot Python script with NetMiko, but somehow the customer is paying and he insisted to have this in the tool because he was thinking maybe I use it later on again. So we ended up to implement our own plug-and-play service. At this time, the protocol was open. Yeah, it was used a lot, but still, I would prefer to not add it to this stack because now we have two different functionalities in the same somehow because it has to be fast. It needed to be done in 1-2 weeks. Yeah, was difficult. One thing I learned is sometimes you have to be persistent to the customer and say, no, I can do it, but I will not. Because This will end up to have an even more complex solution in the same project. I prefer to have just a simple script who can actually do all the work. I will do it gladly and show you how to use it, but I don't want to bring this into the backend so we can display it in the front end. So try to keep it simple if you think it can mess up your whole architecture. We did some slow start, so slow start in this case. This first, in the end, they had a UI with where you could have a CSV file with the serial numbers and the time frame when this device was allowed to update themselves. And first we had to do it with 1, 5, 10, until I think, yeah, almost as 5,000 were updated. So it worked, not so bad, but still now this feature, that code is somewhere there, makes this thing bigger and more complicated, not really needed anymore. So at one point there was like, we have to plug and play, we have this feature, we want to have maybe more features. So there was a whole time where you had to redesign everything. We changed, or not me, luckily we had some front-end engineers who developed a single failure page. Yeah, looking nice. And also at this time we had then a new customer who said, I have heard from a beer colleague that you have this tool, could you also help us? They had a huge rollout because new building, and yeah, they also of course needed new features. So now here they had some more advanced workflows they needed. So this is now how it looks. Still kind of simple, right? They have a lot of mocks, because one thing I can tell you, if you have to maintain this 10 years later, you will be thankful for every test you have written. So we have, I think we have a test coverage of probably 98%. So pretty neat, but we have a lot of mock Docker containers, we have a lot of testing, but otherwise, if I would need to change something 2 years later, it's a mess. And yeah, if you take anything from today or from this speech, please write tests. Yeah, so we have a scheduler, self-implemented, and you had the workshop maybe about workflow engine. At one point you will ask yourself, do I use a product or do I implement it by myself? And there is no easy question. In the end, you have to make a decision if you need to have special features or if you have the possibility to go bigger. Yeah, so this architecture, I have to see about the time. So new features came with a lot of workflows. So we had to implement a one-to-one replacement. So the same box with the same type, with the same interfaces, easy, right? Absolutely no problem. Replacement with a new device. So interfaces names are changing. So now in our workflow engine, we had to implement the mapping between interface names. It was fast gigabit, now it's gigabit, or tomorrow it's 25 gig. So a little bit of logic. Yeah, we had to replace stacks, and stacks had a lot of empty ports, so we had to rearrange interfaces. There was a lot of Python code in the end. It added more complexity. A spoiler, we did in the end up to implement our own workflow engine in Python, quite simple. Nothing so fancy. I lost a discussion battle with my colleagues at this time to not use, I think Stackstorm was also an option as an orchestration tool. But yeah, I was wrong with the Salt 2015, so maybe 2019 I was wrong with using another tool and have more dependencies. We will never know. Most of it was developed by only software engineer, so really nice Python object, everything. This code is well written, I have to say. It's easy to adapt, but still it's extremely customized. How it looked. Now we have also new feature I did not mention is this customer now with the workflow engine has a self-service portal where someone can go to his office room and say, I have this outlet, I want to have this and this VLAN here. He orders it and it will trigger the API and we have enabling LAN port where the access port is automatically configured. So this is not really staging anymore. So now if we go back maybe the beginning, the staging robot, how the other customer persisted to call it, it's just a small piece now. So the whole system got more complex. We had a lot of authentication with LDAP. So if you design, you have to be aware that it can get bigger and bigger, and how do you really maintain this? So you have time until Friday, right? One question you have to ask yourself is, do you build it by yourself or not, right? There is the version, do I have a general version? Do I have to maintain? Do I have maybe a lock-in or not? You have to really think about this. Sometimes maybe it's easier to just start and then you will see how the journey goes, because it's almost impossible to just know in which direction it will end up. Maybe the user will use your tool in a completely different way. So one thing we did was this configuration task as an add-on just for us to make it simpler, but when then the customer came and said, we need to have this LAN port enabling, it was really nice to have already a component who was doing all the job dispatching. So the update was really easy then, but that was just luck that we had this. The staging is still here, as we see, but it's almost not really used because, well, still some staging, but not really the main focus. So we still can stage. There were some extensions that we even can say, if it's on this distribution switch on this port, then it needs to have this and this configuration. But yeah, maybe some numbers. The first customer had this solution in production until mid-23. They staged almost 10,000 devices. So if you think how much time you can save, not a bad number. We had this 5,000 PMP OS upgrade who could be a simple Python script. The new customer, since 2019, has now staged around 700 layer 3 access devices. Not so impressive, but still they have 700 exactly the same configured devices. That's nice to have. And what I did not mention is it's all then with the workflow engine registered in all the tools like monitoring, backup, IPAM, all these tools are then of course integrated. And yeah, I checked the status. They have 1,500 workflow executions in this short time. And I still have to maintain this because there are not many people who can have all the view. I think all the stuff used is open source, so it would be easy to someone to maintain this, but until you understand what my thoughts were, it needs a lot of time. So it's not kind of a engineering locking, but it's still, yeah, it's not like a normal Python script. You can look at it and after 2 hours, you know how it works. I have here some key takeaways. If you work with open source, definitely try to avoid using forks. So you don't want to have to maintain also a fork of this library. That's the nightmare. If it's necessary, we had to take over a couple of not maintained projects anymore, but then we were talking and we could take this over and have the Python package credentials to update all the stuff. So yeah, at one point you will need to debug code from other people. If you're using open source, you have to make many pull requests, you have to make many bug fixes, and this open source is not free. So if you work with open source, you really have to be aware that you have to maintain other code for ports. You have to submit pull requests. Yeah, you want to grow this ecosystem. And testing, definitely key, and also version pinning. You don't want to have your pipeline breaking half a year later and you have no idea which of your 200 open source dependencies cost this. Yeah. Think about who can maintain this. Don't be afraid of failing. Failing can be a success. I have learned a lot in this project. I would do a lot different, but still, yeah, it was a great project. There are no shortcuts. So if you want to make, or if the customer say, I need this feature because we have an emergency update, and you try stuff to make shorter, it will come back as a dependencies or as a, how can I say, yeah, you have to fix this somehow again later. And probably then it's not paid. So try to avoid any shortcuts. One thing that really is not ideal, we have some configuration in the templates, we have some configuration in the database, we have some configuration because it had to be fast in config files, in a Docker container with volume mounts. At the moment, yeah, this is not a great state because we had to make this quick, or at most of this 10 years, this was just a side project because I was in another team and I had to maintain this on the weekends or on the evening when I have time. And there were many quick wins who were, yeah, messing up the whole architecture. So if you really would take the time and keep it nice, take the time, and maybe it takes a couple of days more, but it's nicely done, it's totally worth it. Engineering fluctuation, so many people, or actually I'm the only person now who is still in the network automation area who has seen this code. All the other ones, they are doing AI or IoT or I don't know. But yeah, you have to be aware that people are changing jobs and maybe try to have as many people with the knowledge, but it's not always easy. So, why did it fail? A couple of mistakes. It's not documented well. On the other side, I have to say, I prefer to not have a document than a wrong one. Not having almost any documentation is also hard. A lot of knowledge is just in this brain. So I'm in Amsterdam, really careful with the bikes, that no one hit me. Yeah. Different locations of settings I have mentioned. I'm way over the time, sorry. If there are any questions, maybe we have time for 1 or 2 questions, otherwise I will be there where the beer is.
Let's take one.
Hello, Urs. Nice to see you. What I want to ask is, you showed a lot of things about going deep and all the drawbacks. What would you give as an insight to an engineer who has been going deep in a project and at some point where you learn more and more, you feel like you're leaving your team behind? What would your insight be? Would you go deeper and perfect the tool, but you'll be the only one to maintain it and know how it works, or would you go slower? How would you face that?
That's a tough call. try to find another team. No, I think in the end, you cannot really maintain such tool with a good feeling alone. So if you're going this road and say, I want to go deeper, I want to make it nicer, on one side, I think it's easier to maintain. But you have to think, can you take vacation without your computer? If this tool is not working for 1 month, what happens? Is it business critical? Can it wait for 1 month? So the staging, in worst case, everyone could do this by hand if anything will break. So I'm still having nice vacations. But yeah, you have to think that, I would say you have to try to help your team to get to this level. You have to explain to them why it is important to make this extra step. And you have to talk to your manager to have the resources to educate them well. Thank you.